Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're now streaming live to you on Facebook, so a warm welcome to you if you've just joined us. My name's Roger Schultz. I'm head of the Alice Smith School, and I'm delighted to be joining you this afternoon with a great panel that we put together to have a roundtable discussion about preparing students for a successful international future. And we actually have one of our own students here, Teresa, who will be making some comments later on in our discussion as well. So a warm welcome to you. We hope you find this session interesting. And it is a roundtable discussion. So our guest panelists will contribute to a range of different questions, and we'll also be looking to respond to questions that may be raised from you if you submit those questions, and we will consider those later as well. So I'm delighted that we're working in cooperation with MICCI this afternoon. And we've got the CEO of MICCI, Sean Shah, and I'd like Sean to say a few words. Welcome to you, Sean.
Right, thank you, Roger, and everyone else on the panel. My name is Sean Chia. I'm from the Malaysian International Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the MICCI for short, and we are also one of the trustees on the board of trustees in Alice Smith, and I represent MICCI in the board of trustees. We are one of the oldest chamber in Malaysia. We are about 184 years old, and we have a combined 32 nationalities, that means corporates, and we have also collectively 325,000 employees. So what we're going to do here is giving you all an insight into the what does the industry and employers look for in recruitment. So this is what we're going to have a discourse about today. Okay, thank you. Hand back to you, Roger.
Thank you, Sean. And the Alice Smith School is delighted to have MICCI as one of its trustee organisations who've had a long association with MICCI, and one of our guests is a member of MICCI. You'll meet him in a minute. Let me start by introducing our panel to you and just let them do a brief introduction so you know who we have with us for this roundtable discussion this afternoon. Can I start with Dr. Shandhan Cheng, who's a Professor of Computing and Information Systems at the University of Melbourne. Welcome, Dr. Cheng. Would you like to say a few words to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Roger. And it's a pleasure to join you all and to have a chat with very esteemed panelists or round table panelists. And I think it's always important to listen to what industry has to say when we're thinking about future careers. My role at the University of Melbourne, I'm also the Associate Dean International at the Faculty of Engineering and IT. And part of that role is also talking to industry partners about what they're looking for in our graduates. And so that would be relevant here, I think. Thank you very much for having me on the panel.
Thank you, Dr. Cheng. It's great to have you with us this afternoon. I know you've been working closely with students at our school, actually, and talking to them about skills and skill sets that industry is looking for as we head into the future. Another guest is Datuk Chris Thearaja. He is a parent of the Alice Smith School, and he's an entrepreneur in Malaysia. And I've known Datuk Chris and his family for many years. And his son is actually graduating from Alice Smith School this year and heading off into the bigger, wide world. So welcome to you, Datuk Chris. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you very much, Roger. And it's a real pleasure and an honor to be part of this panel. Thank you for having me. That just as a bit of a quick background, and thanks, Roger, for that. I am a very, very proud Alice Smith parent. My daughter, who is 27 this year, first came through Alice Smith and in fact graduated from the University of Melbourne, Dr. Shanton, I must tell you, and currently working with Ernst & Young. So very proud of that, and Andrew, and just to put things in perspective, that I was in the corporate world and then I did some consulting myself, and then an entrepreneur. So I'm really quite excited about this session and looking forward to contributing positively over the next hour and a half. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Datuk Chris. And we have Teresa Habib Regi with us. And Teresa, I know very well. She has been a student at the Alice Smith School for most of her school life, I believe. And and she graduated last year, is in a gap year this year, but we're delighted that she's heading off to study in the UK next year at St Anne's at Oxford. So I've known Teresa for many years as she's come through our school, and it's lovely to have you with us, Teresa. Would you like to say hello?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Schultz. Thank you everyone for having me. I'm really looking forward to talking to everyone today. So I was at Alice Smith for 14 years. I just graduated in 2020. And as Mr. Schultz said, I'm on my gap year. I'm heading off politics and economics. And hopefully I'll be able to add a student perspective into the discussion today.
Thank you, Teresa. So you're one of quite a number of students who go all through our school and have their full education from preschool right through to graduation year 13. So great to see you and great to have you with us. And lastly, we have Gavin Lazar. Gavin is Vice Principal at the Alice Smith School. He's responsible for our connections with the community and also other general school operations on a day-to-day basis. And Gavin has an extensive international career in international education. Gavin, would you like to introduce yourself and say a few words, please?
Thanks, Roger. And I really appreciate the way you delicately put that in terms of extensive experience. I was in the back of my head, I was just trying to add up the number of years. It's 20 years of international experience. I'm delighted to be part of this group today because I don't see our role as educators in terms of giving students qualifications. I see our role as getting students not even into university. I want to see them getting out of university and leading successful lives. So what we've got to offer here today, I think will be really helpful for us as a school, for our students. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on today as well. Thanks, Roger.
Thanks, Gavin, and thanks to all our panelists for those introductions. And I've just had a couple of interviews actually in the last couple of days about education and about the purpose of education and what we're trying to achieve, and certainly trying to achieve at the Alice Smith School. And very much the point I was making was that being successful and leading a successful future life is much more than about the academic grades that students receive. Certainly that's important, but all of the other things, that the skills that students acquire, the qualities that they develop through their school life will stand them in good stead for a successful future. And certainly some of those qualities are the important things that employers look for when they're recruiting for people for their organisations. Well, let me start off our discussion, our roundtable this afternoon by raising this question, and it's about the qualities that employers most value when they're recruiting. And perhaps if I start with you, Dr. Cheng, what are your thoughts about that? Qualities employers most value when they're recruiting?
It's a great question because you're asking about qualities and not just skills, not degrees and all that, which is fine. That's another different conversation. When it comes to talking about qualities, when I talk to a lot of HR and talent recruiters internationally, including Malaysia, the thing that they're telling me often is, even when we find students and graduates and candidates who are qualified, who've got the right degrees, who've got the right technical skill set, at the end of the day, we also want to know if this is someone we can go to lunch with at least 2 to 3 times a day in a workspace, because they're going to be part of your organization. Do they fit in with the values, qualities, and aspirations of the company, right? So one of the key things around the kind of values that a lot of companies are looking for, things around being able to engage in conversation, to have initiative, to be problem solving, to be creative, and most importantly, to take on the values of the organization. These are some key qualities.
Thank you. Yes, you're very right. The personal qualities that individuals have are so vital. Dr. Chris, in through your career, what are your thoughts about the qualities that employers most value?
Thank you, Roger. And along the same vein as what Dr. Shandhan shared, I would essentially box it into 3 categories. And this is what I look for personally, being an entrepreneur now for 15 years, and prior to that, 15 years in the corporate world as well, that I have absolutely no doubt in my mind, and it's something that in a CV you can't see, but I definitely look for the quality of integrity and honesty in an individual. I mean, we touched on a life skill, and now we're specifically talking about a trait or a quality that we look for when we employ someone. I look for integrity and honesty. The question is, how does one actually search for that? Is a different subject altogether. But point number one is integrity and honesty. And I dare say there will be a discussion on this in due course. Number two is diligence and hard work. Again, it's not something that immediately pops out from a CV, but it's another thing that I look for, diligence and hard work. And lastly, obviously, it's about skills and talents. And obviously that's absolutely critical. And no doubt Dr. Shandhan will agree with me. You need skills and talents as far as doing the job well is concerned. Let me just, before I complete this, the answer to this specific question, Roger, say this. If, for instance, someone is not honest, does not have integrity, I'll tell you this, I don't want them working hard or having a lot of skill in my job. And that's why I say how important that integrity and honesty is the first thing that I look for. Let me just end by just saying those three things at this point.
Thanks, Dr. Chris. I think that'll lead on to some good questions in a minute. What about Sean? Anything you wanted to add to that from your perspective and your experience?
Yes, I think it's not that you can have 50 degrees and PhDs. It boils down to attitude, right? The employer, when he hires you, there's two wants. Okay, if I only want to hire a battery hand, I want you to just sit in the corner and crunch something for you. So the interview process will go like this. I mean, as in a very practical and layman's term. Okay, if I were to ask you 2 + 2, what is the answer, and how would you be an asset to the company? The guy says, I'm very well qualified. I have 50 degrees. I have 2 PhDs, and I can tell you what 2 + 2 = 4. Right. That's it. I mean, if that's the attitude, then it doesn't go anywhere, right? This becomes a battery hand. I just want you to do the job as you want to do. But most employers will look at something differently to say that, all right, 2 + 2, in the new world of big data analytics and AI, the machines will calculate the 2 + 2 for you. Now, what's the difference is this attitude to say, what I am going to do for you with the 4, how it will benefit your company with the 4, right? That is the attitude. No matter what qualifications you have, as long as you have the right attitude, the employers will love it, because it's about giving value to the employer, right? Okay.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah. Teresa, have you got any perspective on that as a student who's going on to higher education and will be looking to enter the world of employment in the future? I mean, what do you see as perhaps attributes that you might have that employers would be looking for in terms of those personal qualities?
Well, firstly, I think it's really interesting what everyone has said. Yeah, not only that it's about the skills that you have, but also who you are as a person. And I think as well, that's kind of what has been stressed to us by teachers, that it's not just about following the syllabus and like, can you do the questions on an exam paper? It's about who you are as a person, what you do with what it is that you learn. Yeah, and I think that's really critical.
I mean, you will have been through the process of writing a personal statement, say, to enter university, and so when you reflect on perhaps the qualities that you have as a young person, do you feel well prepared in terms of having those qualities developed, and thinking about the points that were raised by our panelists here about the things that employers would look for?
Yeah, definitely. At Alice Smith, I think we have a lot of opportunities to kind of use what we learn within the classroom and kind of apply it to other things. And especially when it comes to personal statements, like you mentioned, Mr. Schultz, it's not about writing what you know, it's about what have you done with the knowledge you've learned, and how have you applied that to other things and your interests in general.
Okay.
And so, yeah, through the opportunities I've had at school and also outside of school, we've been able to kind of develop these skills and kind of who I am as a person, and then that kind of gets reflected into the personal statement.
Thank you. Gavin, anything you wanted to add about the qualities of employers and from your experience in educating so many young people who head off into the world of employment?
It's interesting, Roger, what I've been picking up from what people are saying is something that I think I hold true to my heart. I've just written down, it's not what you are, it's who you are. And I think who you are as a person, and I think things like values are really important. I've written down a couple of points as I was listening. I'm sure people have heard the adage, you hire for attitude, not skills, because skills are so much more easily taught to somebody. Changing someone's attitude is sometimes a little bit more challenging. And I've written down a couple of points which I think maybe haven't necessarily been mentioned. Positivity, maybe it has been mentioned in a slightly different way. You know, I want people working in my team who are positive, who've got this can-do approach, who are adaptable. You know, Cripes, we're going through a really challenging 12, 18 months, and it's going to last. And people who aren't positive, despite the challenges that we're facing, and people who aren't adaptable are gonna find things really, really difficult. So for me, people who can work as part of a team, people who can think for themselves, people who are adaptable. And of course, when it comes to education, my background is chemistry. I couldn't come in and teach A-level chemistry without having a background in chemistry. So there has to be some element of what I've termed technical expertise. If you're going to do a job, you need to be able to do the job, but you need to be the right person to do the job, I think is where I'm going with that. Does that make sense, Roger?
Yeah, it certainly does. The sense of who you are is so important, isn't it? You've got to be, I often say to when we interview teachers, is be yourself. You can't be anyone else. You've got to be yourself. You've got to be who you are and try and come across as why you would add value, as Sean said, to an organisation as an employee. And that's so much. Sorry, Dr. Cheng.
Yeah. Can I add to what Gavin has said and totally agree? And I think one of the things is, it's not to say that your degrees and whatever you do is not important. You have to look at your degrees and your expertise and your performance there as a bit like a passport. It opens doors, but it doesn't get you through the door, right? So if you're applying to be an engineer, you need an engineering degree and qualification. You need to have the fundamentals of, we know that you can do some basic calculations, right? But that's just a passport. Whether you've got a degree from Oxford, Cambridge, Melbourne, it doesn't matter. It's a passport. It doesn't mean you are guaranteed to travel with that passport. Your values is what gets you through the door. And I think, you know, even that positivity, I think the other thing to go with the positivity in the 21st century is the ability to collaborate. And I draw on what Sean and Chris have said earlier on. It's about the integrity and the ability to be inclusive and collaborate with other people. You know, increasingly in the 21st century, organizations are also concerned about the well-being of their employees, right? We look after employees, and that's very important. And by the same token, there's a bit of give and take. That means that employees also have to give back. That doesn't mean that you have to be robots. We're not, as Sean said, we are not employing robots. We understand when there are difficult times. But if you are not contributing in the positive times, and then you're asking for help in the negative times, it's not a great look. So there's a bit of collaboration and positivity. And that's the kind of people that many companies would be looking for.
Yeah, very good point. I'll just come to you in a minute, Dr. Chris. I was just looking through the top 5 soft skills in the actual document that you had shared, Dr. Cheng. It's quite interesting that the 2 there that we haven't really mentioned, but persuasion and emotional intelligence. Now, I think to some respect, we tend to take emotional intelligence for granted nowadays. It's just something that has become such a force. It comes, you know, the very things you mentioned about knowing who you are and being able to sell yourself to employers for who you are and where you add value. So that is about, you know, your self-knowledge, your knowledge of others, how you engage and interact, collaborate, etc. So emotional intelligence, but persuasion is an interesting one. And I was just wondering if anyone would like to comment on that, this soft skill of persuasion. Is that important in the entrepreneurial world, that or Chris?
Oh my goodness, thank you for allowing me in here. Absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, some people would say you need to be able to sell. I think sell is too much of a direct word here. I like the word persuasive skills, because that's what you're doing constantly, not just as an entrepreneur, but as a student, as someone in the corporate world. You're basically trying to persuade someone about your ideas, about your abilities, even if you try to get through that door, as someone once said, that you really need to have persuasive skills. But persuasive skills, going back to what I said earlier, with integrity and honesty, because people can see through someone who's just trying to persuade them up the wrong tree. So I qualify by saying persuasive skills for sure, but I go back and touch on this issue of integrity and honesty. That's just on that point. Can I just come back to what Gavin was saying? Gavin, I totally agree with you that we are living in what's known as a VUCA world. And, it's a term that's used in the dictionary and was coined way back in 1987, V being volatile, U being uncertain, C being complex, and A being ambiguous. And for that to be able to deal with the VUCA world, and hasn't COVID taught us about volatility and uncertainty and complexity and ambiguity, it is important to be absolutely resilient. Now, how does school or universities teach individuals to be resilient? That is something that I would like to hear perhaps from the school panel and Dr. Shandhan, because if we are not resilient as individuals, and I can tell you, I mean, I'm 57 this year, and I've been through a roller coaster ride, not just in terms of the corporate world, life in general, especially in the entrepreneurial world. And my business now, which is totally dependent on tourism and in the airport business, we've been hammered totally. But the question is, does one fold up? Does one remain resilient? Does one have the passion to pursue things, be persistent, persevere, and hence prevail? How does one teach those coming through now, through university, school, and universities, to have those, and we talked about qualities earlier, and that to me is important. Yes, Roger, persuasiveness, persuading with integrity, but being able to persist, persevere, and prevail at the same time when we're living in this VUCA world.
Yeah, very good point. I mean, we'll come back to skills in a minute, because I know Dr. Cheng would have some interesting things to share about skills. We've talked a lot about the sort of the soft skills and in terms of personal qualities. But Teresa, looking from your perspective as a student, 14 years at Alice Smith and heading off now at the gap year to university, do you feel that you're resilient as a young person who's heading off to higher education, perhaps is uncertain what the future will bring for you? Would you refer to yourself as being a resilient young person or a resilient adult?
Yeah, I would say so. I guess it's a bit difficult to say something like that about yourself, but I think, yeah, in my life, especially in my studies, there have been periods of time where I haven't been doing as well as I hoped I would. And then through that perseverance, through that grit, I guess I've kind of kept trying, and eventually I've gotten to a point where I'm happy with my studies and, who I am, where I am. Yeah, and again, I think, I don't want to keep talking about the school, but yeah, I think Alice Smith is personally, like for me, they've really helped, the teachers have really helped me in my studies and getting to where I want to be. And I think a lot of the time with young students, they need support in order to develop this kind of perseverance. And if you have a good support network and people that constantly experience and grit comes from.
I mean, grit is a very interesting word. It's Angela Duckworth, I think, isn't it, who coined that phrase, and she actually does a lot of research in that area. Some really interesting reading on grit. Gavin, any other perspective on you there on terms of persuasion or emotional intelligence as two of those soft skills? And then we'll move on to some of the harder skills, I think, and Dr. Cheng can shed some light on some of those things.
Persuasion is fascinating because I'll be honest, it's caught me a little bit by surprise, and I've written it down. Persuasive skills. I've put a big circle around it because I think that's something maybe schools could do more on. I think that we have some activities. We have a program that we call an Achieve program, and the Achieve program teaches students through a variety of activities exactly these types of skills, and we dedicate every child, every student gets time for Achieve, and it's a developmental program, and we have elements in there that are persuasive. We've got one activity where students pitch to me. So I can set aside some money for the students and they want to improve the school. It's a little bit like a Dragon's Den type activity. And they're persuading me with a certain amount of money that this is the thing that the school absolutely needs to do. But what's really captured my attention actually is the importance that people, business leaders in Malaysia, and I'm sure around the world, are saying that actually persuasive skills are important. Maybe it's something, Roger, that as a school we could certainly do a little bit more on. I like that a lot. So thank you for that.
Gavin, do I hear you saying you need me to give you some more money so you can do some more Dragon Dens actor?
I'll just be down over your office in a few minutes, Roger.
That's what seems to be coming through. Well, let's move on a little bit. And we've talked about the soft skills and about those personal qualities. Dr. Cheng, I'm interested to hear from you a little bit more about the actual hard skills, though, about what employers may be looking for in the future in terms of the skill set that people can bring to an organization.
Right. I want to start with a caveat that although I'm from the Faculty of Engineering and Information Technology and my home school is Computing and Information Systems, it might come across as I'm completely biased in what I'm going to be saying. But the reality is when you look anywhere and everywhere, and Google is your friend here, if you look at the top skills that are in demand in the region, and we're talking not just Malaysia, but also places like Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, through to Australia, if you look at Canada, the US, the UK, if you look at any random top 10 skills in demand in these regions, you will see that at least 4 to 6 of them are IT related. And when I say IT, it's a very broad school of IT because IT is not one thing. And yesterday I spent a bit of time talking to the students about the different areas of IT, from supply chain through to cloud-based technology, through to human-computer interaction, through to user experience, which is less technical, through to business IT, which is more strategic and business-oriented. Those skills are going to continue to grow because it's not about working for IT companies. It's about working for any company with those digital skills and know-how, and how to harness the power of IT for the growth of organizations and businesses, and not just businesses, but also government and society in general. So those kind of skills are in demand. But the other thing that's also important is if you look at the more traditional skills around law, engineering, medicine, architecture, a lot of these are also impacted on by technology, and the ability to understand how technology is going to play a role in the strategic development of your discipline continues to be important. For example, students who are studying medicine now at my university actually have to understand the role of health apps, right? How do you use apps for public health so that people don't overburden the health system? Because nowhere in the world, and we think about Malaysia and its health system, which offers a lot of support to its public servants, you cannot have public servants continuing to clog up the health system. It's just not sustainable. So what you do is you work with digital health apps for a more preventative approach. So now medicine has to work with IT as well, right? So some of the key technical skills here, and in COVID, things like telehealth workers in health becomes really important as well. So you start to see that it's not so much that the old jobs are completely gone. It's that McKinsey and Gartner recently separately did some research and found that of the jobs that remain, in the 21st century, some 50% of them will be substantially changed because of technology in some form or other. So you don't have to study IT, but you still need to understand the role of technology in your discipline, right? The best example I can give is during the pandemic, the restaurants that survived versus the restaurants that did not survive. what was the differentiation? They still cook all the great food, but the ones that thrive and survive were the fastest to take on the digital delivery industry and being able to capture that market very quickly. And those that did not survive were the ones who were still waiting for the face-to-face to happen, right? So it's things like that that requires the new generation of graduates to start thinking about not just the traditional skills and degrees that they're going into, but also with the flavor of how is technology going to impact on us.
Could I just chip in there as well, Roger, if I may, just to take on and continue on from what Dr. Shandhan said. Absolutely, I totally agree with that. And something that I would like to add as well, apart from the basics of IT, is this. At the end of the day, the language of business is finance. And the thing that I find that is that at school and at university, you come out without really understanding finance in its proper sense, and not just in terms of business, but as a life skill, as a trait. You mentioned about restaurants earlier, and maybe, yes, you're right, that it's a question of how nimble a particular set of restaurants were to adopt digital technology. But I would say as well, it's about knowledge on finance and knowing how to manage your finances well. And that is so critical to business survival, which leads to life survival, because if you don't manage your finances well, you're going to find that, you don't last very long. And finance is like oxygen as far as businesses are concerned. So I would throw that in. The language of business is finance, and how perhaps schools and universities could help educate or help with an armor for students as they come out into the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Dado, Chris. Can I just go to Sean? Sean, what are you seeing in MICCI through the companies and in the business sector there in terms of hard skills? Can you shed some more light on that, and what you're seeing and what's coming through from your perspective with businesses?
Right. Coming up from Dr. Shandhan, IT, technology, pet project, pet hobby of mine. I mean, I might be a chartered accountant, but I'm very, from my CV, I'm a very technology, IT savvy, right? Just to put in a perspective about, do not fear technology or IT in the new world. Everyone is all worried about AI taking over and stuff like that, big data. Just a extension from what Dr. Chris has talked about. Finance, yes, because the finance is the ultimate end game anyway, right? Even if it is a non-profit or a social enterprise, it's still finance driven at the end of the objective, right? So just to put in a very big perspective about the technology, the new things that come on board, it's actually nothing new. Big data analytics has been practiced for more than 1,000 years. Do you know that? You know, the old days when people observed the stars and the moon and the seasons, they created something which the Chinese use as feng shui or pachi to calculate whether you're going to be a king or you're going to be a beggar based on the dates of your birth. All right, this is from thousands and thousands years of observation and notation and analysis. It's just that nowadays it's fastest. Okay, and in the old days it was used for when do you start to plant, the seasons, when do you harvest and stuff like that. And then the people who knows how to use such technology or this data are like the shamans, the oracles, the priests or the feng shui master, to be able to read the data and then apply it to the common people. So if you were to fast forward it to 2021, it's the same thing. Data is analyzed, AI will generate the outcomes. So those that knows how to use the data will be the future. Those that are able to suggest a solution from the outcome, okay? The calculations and stuff that are all done on machines, okay? I don't need anyone to reinvent the wheel. It's calculated, the outcomes are there. 2 + 2 = 4, all right? So what can we do with 4, okay? That's where it is. And then as Gavin said, over the last 2 years with the pandemic, it becomes adaptability is the next biggest thing. So businesses will need to pivot. All right. So instead of what can you do, I can add 2 + 2 = 4, or the outcome is 4, and what I can do with 4. But the future would be this. Okay, I'm not recommending this, and this has to be with integrity. I think in Datuk Chris is quite correct, with integrity. The next one would be, what is 2 + 2? Then the question would be, what answer do you want? Right? It can be 222. So you may find this unusual. Why 2 + 2 may not equal 4? And if that's the thinking that you have, then that's where you adapt. It's here. Grab, largest taxi company in the world, doesn't own a single vehicle. Oyo, Airbnb, largest hoteliers, don't even own a single hotel. Alibaba, largest shopping mall in the world, doesn't even hold stock. So this is not 2 + 2 = 4 anymore. It's 2 + 2 = something else. So his ability to think out of the box, that's the future.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Very interesting. Let me change tack a little bit. And we've talked a lot about soft skills and hard skills and what employers are looking for. I want to perhaps move back to a little bit more to an education focus as we develop young people. And I might put Teresa on the spot here, and I don't mind if you talk about the other Smith School, Teresa. I don't, because it's something that's very, very dear to my heart. But my next question, my general question is, what are the hallmarks of an outstanding all-round education? And that's not just secondary education, that's tertiary education, vocational education. If we look at education in general, what are the hallmarks of an outstanding all-round education? What are the features that you would see? Teresa, so from your experience of coming through school, I guess, do you feel you've had a good education, a great education, and what are the things that stand out for you on that educational journey that you've been on and will still be continuing on for some time? We're all learners. We continue to learn all our life.
Yeah, well, firstly, I just want to say I totally agree with Mr. Chia in saying that adaptability is really important. And I think that Alice Smith and schools in general kind of help develop this kind of adaptability by really taking learning beyond the syllabus and throwing different challenges at students. So like at Alice Smith, we have wider learning days and things like that, which kind of help students look at problems in different ways and maybe see things they've not necessarily seen before that aren't, in past paper questions or exams, and kind of applying that into the real world. And so I think that's really helpful in, again, developing perseverance, but also, this adaptability. And I think as well, going back to the idea of looking beyond the syllabus and kind of fostering an environment of like wanting to learn more. Because I think once schools kind of develop this attitude in students wanting to learn more, then the adaptability comes from that, because a lot of young people now already know how to use the technology that we have now, like Grab, bringing social media presence into all these different companies. But I think where the change is going to come is students wanting to learn how they can use new technology and how they can utilize all these sorts of tools that we have, and then building up from that. So
the Japanese have a term for this, Kaizen, as you would know, continuous improvement. And that's exactly what you're talking about, Teresa. Yeah. Kaizen, Japanese.
Just coming back to that point, Teresa, I've heard some interesting comments. I've done a number of sessions like this forums about talking about future skills and future workforce, and I've had comments that perhaps the younger generation, the digital citizens, etc., are a little bit impatient, that they really want to get into a company, an organisation, and really contribute, add value very quickly, perhaps I'm pretty long in the tooth now, but the old age where experience counts, et cetera, that we have a generation coming through that have the skill sets, they have the technological capacity, and and they really want to get in and have the opportunity to make a difference. And so I wonder if other people have got any comments on that, and where do we see, we talk about what skills employers are looking for: agility, adaptability, perseverance, etc., the soft skills, and Dr. Cheng mentioned some of the hard skills, but do we think that we have, with the generation coming through, that we have the capacity to provide the challenges, the opportunities for them that they need to be able to flourish and thrive in the workplace? Dr. Cheng, what do you think?
I'm going to answer two parts of this question. The first one, I'm going to start by answering that one, and then I'll go back to what is an all-rounded education. The first thing I want to say is that I really do not envy my graduates who are starting to look for work right now, because compared to what I had to do 40 years ago, I mean, I feel like I did maybe 15% of the work looking for a job compared to what they have to do now in this very competitive and ever-changing world, right? It's almost like they need a full CV by the time they apply for their first job post-university. And you know, back in the good old 80s and 90s, you don't need a full CV before you apply for your first job. That's the reality. So in some ways, we are expecting a lot more of the graduates coming into organizations, particularly if you look at some of the professional services firms, you know, when they're getting 40,000 applications for, you know, 100 graduate roles. It's that level of competitiveness where students are expected to come in with almost a full CV, where they've volunteered in 10 different organizations, have led a few of them, and have also done part-time jobs in a relevant area by the time they are 23, right? So if you think about that, you then have to think as an organization, if you are bringing these young people in, it's not a matter of we're just going to pick the best and then let them grind through how we've always grind through the last 40 years. You need to channel that positive energy. And not all organizations are able to do that. And that's why some organizations really struggle to retain talent. It's become a game. It's no longer, you know, once a graduate is in an organization, the game then shifts to the organization trying to retain them and keep that organizational knowledge and the best, because they move, right? They move from company to company. And it's astounding. Some students stay for no more than 2 years maximum in each company that they are moving across because they lose interest. So I think that's something that is very challenging in industry. Going back, however, to the education that's needed, I always think that from a university or a school's perspective, there are 4 aspects that we need to think about. There's the traditional curriculum of what we're trying to teach them in the textbook, in the classes and all that. There's the invisible curriculum, which is what they're expected to do in order to thrive. Things like group work, collaboration, persuasion, that's where that invisible curriculum has to be built in and thought about. Then you've got the core curriculum, things like giving space for them to do volunteering, to lead student clubs, to enhance those skills. And most importantly, the 4th part is the working together with industry collaborators and partners. Because you cannot use your, you know, I know that you can see in my picture in the back, people think that I'm in an ivory tower. But as a university, we cannot do that. We actually have to, I mean, most of my subjects have industry input into it, practitioners coming in and collaborating. So that's the 4 parts. But that's from an institution's point of view. For the student, they not only have to deal with all that curriculum, but they also have to think about their own employability and professional development in the future. But more importantly nowadays, also their health and well-being. I always say to my students, if you are not well, you cannot be a good student. So a lot of students throw themselves into a new environment and study, and then they burn out, right? And we've seen some of the most brilliant students burn out. And that's not healthy either. So a well student is also very important as part of that education.
Thank you. I mean, Gavin, what are your thoughts on that? In the hallmarks of an outstanding all-round education?
I've been listening with interest because I love the idea of experience, getting experience, and it's such a challenge for, you know, Teresa, your cohort. It's going to be hard for them. And my son was part of Teresa's cohort. My daughter is a year older, and they are going to struggle. I know they're going to struggle, but what will help them is getting opportunities to experience the workplace. And that's where organizations like Dr. Chris's assists us in offering students places to get that experience. So that's one aspect. But I think the other aspect that for me is really important, and maybe I want to bounce this around from people in the corporate area, is I'm intrigued as to what you feel about calculated risks, because for me, I want students to take risks. I want students, forgive me, Teresa, on this one, but I want students to experience failure. I think that's a really healthy thing to do in a very managed, controlled way when they're young. And as they grow up and as they gain experience and self-belief, those risks, those calculated risks, they're not just extreme risks, they're calculated risks, become more challenging for them, and they will have to juggle things in their life. So for me, I think part of an all-round education is giving students opportunities to take risks, to trip up over themselves, and then have support from home and school to pick them up. Sean, Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, can I?
Yeah, go, Sean, please.
Go, Sean.
Taking risks. This excellent. Do not the industry taking interns, okay, right? And there is always this thing about paying poorly and stuff like that, right? So this is about taking risk. The employer in taking an intern is also taking a risk. That's why it's got to do with the compensation, right? So as a newly graduated student looking for a job, or the initial job, as what Dr. Shandhan said, is a full CV. And here you are, we are giving you a full CV. But bear in mind that even though you're graduated from a very high university, then your expectation, oh, I get so little pay, you know, I should be worth more, you know. If you were to take that attitude out and take a bit of a risk, okay, now what the industry does, if when they take you in, they are taking a risk with you, and so should you be taking a risk with them too. Now, where the gem is that if your job is shoveling garbage, a mountain of garbage, right, and you're poorly paid for it, you will gripe about it. But that's where the attitude comes in, as what the other panelists will say. As long as you say, okay, I'm shoveling garbage, what do? I can look for any gems within the garbage, right? As long as you have a mind to look for it, you can look for it, you can find it. Or because of the mount of garbage, you can climb to the top of the garbage mount, and then you can look ahead at some other better opportunities. So this is the risk that you are taking. So do not be hampered by, okay, I'm a graduate of this, and therefore I need to be compensated for that. It's just about the attitude of starting somewhere and to be able to look at where the gems are. This is where the 2 + 2 is never equal to 4 anymore. Because if you have identified an opportunity, a little gap of where you can excel in, that's where the benefits will be. That's what, at the end of the day, an all-round education comes back to things called the EQ, the emotional intelligence, or the emotional quotient. It is passion, it's about creativity, it's about critical thinking. You have to have a global outlook to be able to absorb another culture, so that then your mind is broader, so that you can look at things not seeing you shoveling garbage in a pile, rather than you're given the opportunity to find the gem or to climb the pile to look at other opportunities. So I guess it comes back to, yes, hard skills are required. I'm not saying that they don't not required, but it's a given that you've been trained, you should be able to do so. But what makes the difference would be this softer skills, which is then the EQ. I think an all-round education would be ability to be exposed to different cultures. That's very important, to be to know another culture. If you know another culture, your mind broadens. You see things differently. Back to you.
Thanks, Sean. Dr. Chris, I mean, Andrew, your son's coming to the end of his 13 years education in primary, secondary school environment. What do you look for in an all-round education? What is it that's important to you as a parent? What do you want for your child?
Thank you, Roger, and I will address that specifically. Also, I would touch on some of the very interesting areas that we've just talked about. Starting with your question, definitely the one thing that I've told both my children, I mean, Andrew was privileged to be able to go through the entire Alice Smith School experience from year 1 right up to year 13. Natasha, who is 27 this year, and she did her entire secondary education at the Alice Smith School. The thing that I've told them is this: whatever it is, the life skill that we've all got to learn, and sometimes we trip up on. And I'm sorry to go back to this. It's about this integrity and honesty, number one. And I've told them this repeatedly, even with Natasha now working in the commercial world. She works with Ernst & Young Malaysia in the advisory capacity. I've even told them this: even if it's one parking ticket that you're going to claim, and if it's 50 cents, do not dare put in a wrong claim. You can never recover from that. And I said to them, and I keep on drumming this into my children, do not trip up on this issue of honesty and integrity. So that's number one. Number two is, and Teresa mentioned the word grit. I love that word grit, because that word grit goes in a way parallel to this word greed, G-R-E-E-D, which I've also seen in business. And it's something that one must stay away from. Okay, I know I'm going back to this issue of honesty and integrity, and sorry to sound like a broken record, because we've seen this happen over and over again in business, people being greedy, taking shortcuts, and then, ending up in trouble. And let me just say that I was fortunate to have, and this is going on to talk about Dr. Shantan's issue about collaboration between businesses and universities, that Harvard Business School had in 2013 asked me if I wanted to undertake and mentor 6 of their graduates from Massachusetts, Boston. And they have a program called FIELD, which is F-I-E-L-D, Field Immersion Experiences for Leadership Development. And they send out their graduates, their Harvard MBA graduates around the world, and they make their selection based on different criteria. And lo and behold, I got a call one day from Boston and asked if I was prepared to take on 6 of their undergraduates to set them a project and mentor them. And I was very privileged to have them here in Malaysia. And the one thing that we talked about is this issue of grit versus greed in business. And when I eventually had the opportunity to speak to the dean of Harvard Business School, at that time, a gentleman by the name of Nitin Noria at Harvard in 2015, that we spent 1 hour, and I kid you not, Roger, 1 hour talking about this topic about integrity, because this is what business schools are lacking today. And I find that going back to this quality, everyone has talked about passion, everyone knows about that, all the other things that we're doing right. But I find that increasingly so, this is what's lacking now in a school setting or in a university or a business school setting. And I think now they've got actually a program on it, a special program on integrity and honesty and how to do things properly. And touching on another subject where you talked about experiences, Roger, that and maybe impatience with some graduates, I will tell you this: if I see a CV coming through to me that is a rolling stone, that means a person has been at one organization for 1 year and another for 6 months, and I do not touch them. I just do not touch them. They just go off straight off my table, and I look for someone else. Okay, as I said, I'm 57 this year. I may come from an old school type thinking. In my organization, when I worked in one organization, and I'm very proud of that organization, it's actually a tea organization, Bow Plantations. 15 years I spent there, 15 great years. I learned everything that I needed to learn there first. And then when I eventually started my business, and I only could do that business successfully because of all that experience that I gained patiently in that company. And I use the word patience. And that's also a trait that I would like to stress to the millennials, patience. So lots of subjects here intertwined, but I'm just trying to put it all out there. So Roger, back to you.
Patience is a very interesting word. I mean, based, hearing what Dr. Cheng said earlier about that, that younger people, the generation coming through, they will move on. If they're not challenged, if they don't feel that they're valued and not given the opportunity to show what they can offer, that they will look elsewhere. I agree with you, Dr. Chris, that there is a generational gap here, I think, between, current young people coming through for education, talented, skillful. When I think of the quality of education nowadays to back when I was a student, our young people are just so much better prepared for university, for going on to work in organisations. They are under more pressure. They're under more pressure to achieve, develop skills, talents. It's a very different world for young people like Teresa coming through, heading off to university and heading off into the world of work. So they do look for those opportunities. I think they do want to be loyal. I think my view is that they do want to be loyal to the people they work for, but at the same time, they don't want to be treated as people who don't have something special to offer. And so it's about opportunity. And I think that's a big challenge for employers and companies to work out how they can, Sean mentioned about retaining these people, how you can retain people in your workforce and really use them to add more value to what they can give. And I think, Dr. Cheng, you may want to comment here, but I think this is the trend we're going to see, Dr. Chris, that I think we all value loyalty to an organisation, but at the same time, we've got a responsibility to make sure that loyalty is justified and that people are given the opportunity to really thrive, grow, develop. And I'm not saying this in a financial sense. I'm saying this in a growth sense in terms of how they feel about themselves, their work, and how they see that they're valued. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Cheng?
I want to be very careful here because, every generation has a variety of students. They are not all the same, right? So I want to be very careful in how I phrase this. But one of the things that I do want to bring up is it's not that the millennials and the young people are just thinking that they are also special, right? It's not that. But they've gone through an education system, not like what we went through 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. One of the key attributes that we've taught our next generation is to speak up and to share their ideas. So in effect, when they go out to organizations, it's not so much that they're looking for power immediately. It does come across like that, but ultimately at the very bottom, at the very core, when I talk to my new fresh grads and alumni who are starting out in companies, all they want is for someone to listen and to be heard. And that is more important than anything because they spend their time, if you think about from year 9 to year 12, and then the first 3 years of university, those who go on to masters, we tell them, you need to speak up in class because we need to know what you're thinking. After 7 years of that, they can't just shut it off, go to a new company and go, I have nothing to say, just tell me what you want me to do. And I know companies are not doing that, but what is happening is that we've trained a whole generation of graduates to speak up. And sometimes the ones who move on are the ones who speak the loudest. And this is where, it comes back to what I was saying earlier on about, can I go to lunch with this person or will I be sick of them talking at me the whole time? And so there has to be a balance for the students to understand. And this is where emotional intelligence comes in, right? You can't have emotional intelligence if you rush through things and do not self-reflect. And this is the challenge for young people. It's not so much that they all think they're special, but it's more that they need to do a bit more self-reflection and slow down. Digital technology doesn't allow you to slow down. It quickens everything. And the challenge for young people is not so much that they think they're special, but that they need to slow down and think a little bit. And maybe that comes across as they need to be patient as well. But more importantly is the self-reflection and self-reflection before they speak up. But we are part of the problem at schools and universities where we told students to speak up for 7 to 8 years before they go out to their first job. Just a bit of a different perspective there.
Thank you. Teresa, I'm going to come back to you here because I'm going to be a little bit controversial and say that perhaps, you know, the millennials, the younger generation coming through looking to enter into the world of work, but perhaps they're a little bit selfish in terms of what they want and what they look for in an organisation. And they're not prepared to wait. They don't have the patience perhaps they need to, you know, to reap the benefits of perhaps, you know, sticking out something that may not be their cup of tea, so to speak, initially, but they want everything too quickly. I mean, what are your thoughts on your generation? Do you see perhaps your generation as being a little bit selfish in terms of wanting it now, wanting it quickly? We often talk about the generation that you can't wait for anything, you know, that it's very gratuitous, you know, everything, you want things immediately, instantaneously, and it's the way, the digital age really, in terms of what you've experienced. What are your thoughts on that?
I definitely agree with everything that's been said to a certain extent. I think it all comes back to this idea of balance. And I agree with Dr. Chang in terms of like self-reflection. I think it's really important for young people to be able to look at their surroundings and take a break and just absorb everything and then weigh the pros and cons. It is true that sometimes I see a lot of young people, especially around me, that don't really think things through and want everything to come straight away. And I think that is to do with the digital age and how we expect everything to happen immediately. But again, with this idea of self-reflection and balance and taking a step back to realize what's going on, I think that is really important. Yeah.
I mean, so when you graduate from university and after you finish your study, what are you going to look for in a company? What when you look for jobs, what are you going to be looking for?
Yeah, this is a tricky question for me. I have no idea what I want to do after university. But I think as a generation, I think millennials or Gen Z, we kind of look for different things in a company, I guess. Perhaps older generations might look for stability. At least at my point in my life, I'm looking for a bit of an adventure. So something exciting. Not so much stability, which I know when I've had conversations with my father about what he looked for in a job, it was very much, you know, stability, building your skills and things like that. But from my...
Are we losing you a bit there, Teresa? I'm afraid we're losing. Oh, that's better.
So I think that might be as well.
Thank you.
I was just saying.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we missed a little bit of the end there, Teresa. You just want to try again?
Okay, so from the conversations I've had with my friends and my peers, it is more about adventure and having new experiences, different experiences, rather than looking for that stability.
Yeah.
Again, that kind of links back to patience. I mean,
yeah,
we might not have the patience to stick with a company for a long time because we're not looking for that stability. We're looking for something different. But
yeah.
that's my...
No, it's a very good point. I mean, our son is 31 and he's currently with PwC in Sydney, but he started with Accenture. He's been with 4 different companies, you know, since he graduated. And all great experiences all around that 2-year period. So it was interesting to hear your comments about people jumping ship. But again, he's not necessarily looking for stability. He's looking more for the challenge and what that presents and the opportunity, because by moving to somewhere else, he will learn something new, and the opportunity to learn something new is exciting. So we have a generation who look for that. They're keen to learn. They want to learn. They want to have the opportunity to learn. And so that's what I was coming back to my point earlier, perhaps, that retaining employees within companies, it's important to create those opportunities, pathways, try and tap into that energy, that skill set, that potential, and create those opportunities to keep young people on track. But Gavin, just any final comments from you in terms of what's been talked about? And we've got a question that's come through, and I thought this might be an interesting one to bring up with the group as well.
Thanks, Roger. I'm thinking with one mind in two camps here, and part of me is thinking in terms of recruitment for our school. What do we do to retain staff that we really want to retain? And I think a lot of it revolves around giving them that challenge that a number of people have mentioned here. I think challenge is really important. Humans need challenge. Nobody wants to be doing that same job. People who work in the toll booths, handing over the money, where's the job satisfaction? We need that job satisfaction. So, our school offers a really great opportunity for staff to develop themselves professionally. And for me, that's brilliant. So if a member of staff feels that they want to work in a particular aspect of education and it fits with where the school is going, let's get them trained up, and it gives them an opportunity to improve themselves. It continues their learning, but it also gives back to the organization. So for me, respecting individuals as well as the individuals respecting the organization, that mutual respect and offering people challenge, probably that's the most essential thing from my perspective, Roger.
Okay, thanks, Gavin. I've got a question here which has come through from a member of the audience, and it's from Ariuna. And it's we talked about integrity, Dr. Chris, and you spoke about that a lot. And this is an interesting one in the current situation we're dealing with, in particular with the pandemic. It's been a very challenging situation economically. But the question's raised about integrity of companies, actually. So, people who may have been quite loyal to companies and worked for companies for many years, and all of a sudden they find that they're no longer in employment, that the company has let them go. Or they found someone else that they can bring on because it's more economically effective for the company, perhaps younger, cheaper people to come into those roles. So this is an interesting world we live in, isn't it? Because this relationship between employers and employees, and it's not. I don't think it's not necessarily an ageist situation that someone is too old, but in tough economic times, there are tough decisions that companies need to make. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Chris?
Thank you very much, Roger, and thank you for that question. It's a brilliant question. I can only speak for myself as an employer in answering this question directly. That interestingly, yesterday, 23rd of March, Skybus celebrated its 15th anniversary. And the thing is, well, thank you, but we've had a very rough time because of COVID. And I can just say this to you, that over those 15 years, and I talked about finance being the language of business and how important it is that one manages one's finances well, that fortunately we've managed to build our reserves up nicely over those 15 years. And the one thing that I learned from my time at Bow Plantations over those 15 years in the corporate world is how to prepare for a rainy day. And my God, I'm glad I prepared not just for a rainy day, but for this huge tsunami come COVID that hit my business left, right, and center. Our revenues basically plunged by over 96%, and all my workforce and bus drivers and staff could see that. There was just a total shutdown in the business. But to come back to your question, honesty and integrity is definitely a two-way street. Point number one. Point number two is what we try and do as employers is not just talk the talk, but walk that talk. And what we did was we got together as a team and we used our reserves to pay out our drivers and staff according to the law, and not just to the law, above the law insofar as their needs are concerned. And all of them have told me in no uncertain terms, please call us back when the airports open, when the borders open, when we can start driving again, because some of them have gone on and they said, they will take the money, and I'm glad they did. And we paid them off, and, we had to do it properly by law. So we went to, the Labor Department, filled up the necessary forms, told them this. And then there are certain guidelines to follow in terms of how many years of service in connection to their monthly salary multiplied by their years of service, et cetera, et cetera. And we followed all of that to a T, and some of them opted for that, and which was great. And we honored that. And they are the first ones who have constantly said, please take us back in the moment the borders open and we can restart. As painful as it was financially to do that, I live in peace knowing that that was the right thing to do. At the end of the day, they were the ones that helped this business and this company accumulate those reserves. And it's right that it be, in a sense, shared at a time like this. I can only speak for myself. I'm human. We make mistakes. We're not perfect. But what we try and do is to have everyone understand what our qualities and traits and values are as an organization. And I tell this to my people, at the end of the day, there is no separation between work and non-work, if you like. It's all about living, isn't it? It's all about life, work, harmony. And if I'm going to do this, I want to make sure that my team does it. And that's the way we operate. I'm not saying that we're perfect. I'm not saying that we're holier than thou. I'm just saying that I value that so much over and beyond money. Money is important. Let me be clear. The reason why I went into business is because of money, in terms of wanting freedom, that money buys freedom. And if you're in a corporate world all your life, sometimes you don't get that freedom, and it's what I wanted for my life. So to address your question specifically, thank you for that question. It has to be a two-way street.
Yeah.
I hope I've addressed that clearly.
No, I think businesses, it's tough to run businesses, and the pandemic has had a huge effect. Sean, do you want to chip in there?
Yeah, okay, right. First thing is, understand all businesses by default would not do anything to jeopardize its sustainability, right? So it needs to survive. That's the first point. The second point is, it is also a family. There is also a lot of workers in there. So imagine that you are a parent and you have 10 children, right? And you can't sustain. You have to make a choice. So yes, my heart goes out to the person who worked for 10 years and the word they say kicked out, right? So that person feels rather aggrieved. But have you asked those that stayed on? They have a job because the company has to rationalize so that he can keep others in the job, right? And the third point would be is that, why are you kicked out? Because as I said, a business sold by default is for survival. So if you are a key to the business survival, would you think that the company would kick you out? It wouldn't. I mean, that's integrity too. I mean, it's not that it's unscrupulous. They still have the integrity to protect the rest of the employees. So therefore, it is about what I already mentioned earlier. It's about adaptability. It's about upskilling. It's about how you skill. For 10 years in a company, you would have acquired such skills that ensures the organization will have perpetual sustainability, right? So therefore, a company would not simply let go someone for any other reasons. It needs to protect the other employees too, okay? Again, as I say, yeah, we are all not saints. We have to choose among our 10 sons, which has to be, released, which we were to keep. It's a very, very tough job. It's a tough job. If you were to sit on the employer's point of view, it's really, really tough. And you also would not know that the sleepless nights that Dato' Chris, myself, I'm also a business person. The sleepless nights, payroll is coming next week. Where do I get the cash? Well, as an employee, you enjoy the blanket that knowing that next week you have your pay. Whereas for the employer or the businessman, I tell you, we scratch our heads. Where are we going to get the cash for next week? We roll. These are the risks that we take, and we have to make certain choices. Yeah. So you have to look at it in a bigger picture in that way. Yeah, unless there are some that are wrongfully dismissed. I mean, I'm not saying that they are not, but sometimes you have to look at it on another point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can still be loyal. Loyalty, as Dr. Chris said, it's a two-way street. You can be loyal, but it still needs to be tough decisions, but you're still being loyal when you're making those tough decisions. It comes back to what we spoke about earlier about values as well, about developing our own values. And often people choose organisations because they look for how those values fit with their values. And so that there's a coalition there between your own personal values and why you want to work for that organisation and what it means to you personally. And certainly I think that's becoming more of a trend with the younger generation, that they look for where they make a connection through their own sense of values and their own sense of purpose, as well as the skills they have to offer. But they look then to make that connection. And that's where I think that loyalty comes from, and they can build on that loyalty as long as they're given the opportunity to grow and be recognised and feel that they're valued by the organisation. I want to move on a little bit. We're getting close to the end, and I want to come back to this question. We've talked a lot about the soft skills, the hard skills, and what employers would look for in someone in the future. We've talked about perhaps the generational differences we see within the world of work, and also we've talked a bit about what we look for in education and what makes education valuable. Teresa, I want to come back to you, and as a young person who's come through education and is still going through into higher education, what do you think the education system worldwide perhaps could do to help students prepare more successfully for their future, so that as they leave the world of education, leave higher education, that they're going to be as best prepared as they can be to have a successful future in the world?
Yeah, so one thing that I personally wished I spent more time going through at school is languages. I know Alice Smith does quite a good job with that in comparison to a lot of other schools, but I think there's still a bit of room for improvement. I think languages are so important, especially for young people now with how interconnected everything is. And most of my peers I know want to travel with work, and so I think languages are super important to prepare for the future. With respect to other things, I would say, again, going back to this idea of adaptability that we keep coming back to, I think it's really important for schools to emphasize this kind of perseverance and problem solving and applying your knowledge in different ways, not just, again, following the syllabus and, learning for exam's sake, but like Dr. Theagara just said, this idea of being in love with learning and really enjoying what you do, because I think once you get that, then all the other skills kind of come with it. And I think schools need to try and foster this kind of atmosphere a little bit more.
Do you think, I'll put you on the spot here, do you think that school was allowed to let you fail, to have this experience? Gavin talked about sort of planned failure, or in that sense, but do you feel that you had enough experiences there through that concept perhaps of not achieving as you felt you would achieve, and this concept of grit and perseverance? Is that something that you felt you developed and were able to be sort of taught or learned through your education?
I think rather than it being taught, it's more of providing the opportunities for students themselves to kind of go through this process. I personally felt like I did. I failed quite a lot, and I think that's kind of what led to a lot of my successes. And I think Alice Smith was really good to me in providing the opportunities for me to be able to do this. But I know other students perhaps weren't as lucky. So I think by providing more opportunities for students to do this kind of thing, and again, providing a more robust support system for students so that they know that failure is not an issue, and that especially when school, perhaps not later in life, but at school, if they fail, then it is okay. I think that's really important.
You're right. It is about a culture, isn't it? That it's okay, that there's a feeling there that it is okay not to do as well as you thought you would. And every failure is a learning opportunity. So how that culture permeates throughout a learning environment, whether it be, when children are young, as they become adolescents, as they go into university, that culture is very, very important. And how they bounce back. To me, what the most important thing is how you bounce back from failure. You make a mistake, things didn't go as well as they did, but how do you bounce back? And this comes back to this grit and perseverance, resilience, that you're able to bounce back from that, learn from that experience and come out of it as a better person.
And I think, sorry if I may, I think that goes back to what Dr. Chang said about this idea of self-reflection and being able to look back on your mistakes and then see what you can improve. That's also something that I think schools in general really need to push.
Dr. Chang, I see you want to chip in there.
Yeah, I go to almost the end of the journey to say that, one of the, in many job interviews for graduates, one of the questions that graduates are often asked is, tell me a time when you failed and what did you do about it? The wrong answer is, I have never failed, I'm fine. Because that's actually indicates a lack of self-reflection. That's the first thing. And I tell my students, if you ever say you've never failed at that job interview, you've lost the job. That's the first thing I tell all my students, right? So if you then work back towards that, it means that at university, we have to provide early feedback. And it's now week 4 of semester. My students have just submitted their first assignment and half of them might fail. And I tell them that you can fail this one, but if you learn from it, you could still get a high distinction in 6 weeks' time, but you've got to learn from it. So actually being able to set it up so that the students, through the scaffolding and support, are able to fail and self-reflect and think about what they're doing. Because you cannot have resilience if you've never failed. Can I just, if you've never failed, and mom and dad is coming in and betting for you the whole time, and if you fail one subject, mom and dad is at the school principal and say, how dare you fail my child? That's actually not building resilience, right? So then coming further back to secondary school, I work with the Council of International Schools that's based out of Europe as well, which you guys are a member of. And I'm trying to get them to institute this idea of getting their member schools to have a charter for the Losers Club. I call it the Losers Club. So basically it's a club where any student who has failed at anything from sports to failing a subject has a debriefing session. It's the Losers Club debriefing, and owning that failure and self-reflecting and thinking about what they could have done better. And I think at the school level, that is so important, because when you go to university, and I'm not saying this to scare you, Teresa, the fact is, whatever failure you've gone through right now, you've actually got your family next to you, right? You've got that support structure. You don't have to worry about cooking your next meal when you're miserable and you've gone through a failure. When you go over to the UK, when you failed, you're going to be by yourself in your miserable room, right? And the thing is, you've gone through the failure here, you know the self-reflection that's needed, and you know that you've got your parents' support back home. But if you've never failed, and you fail for the first time when you go to Boston or Melbourne or anywhere, and you start to panic, the wheels fall off very fast. And that is a danger. And I think at the school level, that failure is important to build resilience. But I like Gavin's thought that it has to be scaffolded, it has to be structured and supported. And that's why I suggest a Losers Club where people debrief amongst their peers to say, what could I have done better? This was such an idiotic move. What could I have done?
I like that concept of a Losers Club. Just talking about parents protecting their children from failure, it's very interesting. I mean, you will have heard of the phrase helicopter parents, who hover over their child and don't want the child to have any level of risk or sense of failure at all, and they're very overprotected. And that's moved on now to the shovel-nosed parent. So the shovel-nosed plough, where they actually bulldoze everything out of the road to make sure that there's no obstacle in the road of their child that could lead to any sense of failure. It's quite interesting that parents perhaps don't grasp that sense of protection, overprotection, is not helping their child. It's not helping their child to grow, to learn, to have a sense of self-reliance and resilience. So very interesting
Absolutely.
area.
And if I might add, that leads to, the difference between a student who says, I applied for 500 jobs and only got 2 interviews, but I was successful at the end, versus the student that said, I applied for 5 jobs and didn't get any interviews. I'm a total failure. Life is miserable. There is no hope. That's the difference, I think.
Yeah, and that comes back to attitude, doesn't it? Let me just go around and just on this, something more that we could do in general, and then I think we'll wrap up. Sean, any comments from you?
Right, I'm just about to say, don't forget the Naughty Boys Club. Get to know them. These are going to be the next unicorn and the big timers, I tell you, the Naughty Boys Club, okay? Okay, wrapping up to Teresa, yes, employers also want it now and want it quick. I mean, if you're able to deliver now and deliver quick, that's what they want. They don't want you to just sit there and learn. Take your time. So anyway, it's there. At the end of the day, integrity, all the EQs, academic scoring high and stuff like that, it's not really the 100%. Get involved as a student, and that's where an all-round education is very important. It's not about a education that teaches you how to add 2 + 2. It's about ability to do what to do with the 4, and then get involved in activities, extracurricular activities, be part of problem solving. It shows to the employer your ability to work with people, to solve problems, leadership, passion in pursuing maybe badminton or something like that. So get yourself involved in extracurricular activities at school. It really helps. Back to you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sean. Dr. Chris, any closing comments from you?
Yes, that in life, we will all be hit with highs and lows. When there are the highs, they are the gifts in life. Enjoy it, celebrate it, savor it, is what I would say. And this is what I keep on telling myself, sharing this with my family and close friends. The lows in life, they will come. And those lows, there are lessons. And I try and ask myself, what are those lessons in those lows? And learn from those lessons and move on. We will make mistakes in life, but I also try not to repeat the same mistake twice, because when you make the same mistake twice, it's actually not a mistake, it's actually an active decision to make that mistake. So those are the 2 things that I would say to share with everyone. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Chris. Gavin, any closing remarks from you?
Thanks, Roger. Yeah, preparing students for a successful international future. Exams, academics are absolutely one of the routes through, and we can't deny that. That's just the way of the world. But one of the things that we've worked on very hard as a school over the last few years is a set of values and core values that we hold true to as a school. And we've got values. Our 5 values as a school are resilience, respect, integrity, connectedness. And one thing I don't think has been mentioned explicitly this afternoon, kindness. Those 5 values for me are fundamental to success in life. And, however you define success, if you can get those 5 right, for me, success comes automatically. Yes, there will be highs. Yes, there will be lows, as Dr. Chris has said. But those 5 values, I'll say them again: resilience, respect, integrity, connectedness, and kindness. Those for me are fundamental. Thanks, Roger. Thank you very much.
Look, I think we might wrap it up there. I think it's been a very interesting session, and we've covered some interesting ground, and I think we've all learned something. I think we never stop learning, do we? I certainly just really enjoy hearing points of view and people's different perspectives. And Teresa, it's been lovely to have you with us, to hear your perspective as someone who has been through a certain stage of their education, has a further stage to go, and is entering the world in a very, very interesting time, an incredible century, really. And, some of the major challenges that the world is facing, such as global warming and trying to emerge from a pandemic. And really what we've seen internationally, where there's been very much nationalistic drives in many countries through politics and the way people are viewing their perspective. It's a very challenging world that we're living in at the moment, but probably no more challenging than the world was 100 years ago, and we need to keep that in perspective. But it is important that we all look to work together. The things we spoke about, the very issues of collaboration and the value that Gavin mentioned about kindness. There is so much more we can do as a human species to make the world a better place. But in terms of spending time with you this afternoon, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been very interesting, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you, Chris, for joining us. Gavin, Teresa, we certainly wish you all the best for the rest of your gap year and then for your studies at St. Anne's at Oxford. All the very best for that. I'm sure that any company that has an opportunity to take you on board once you graduate from university will be very fortunate, because I know that you have so much to offer. Yeah, Sean's keen to take you on. You can come back and Sean will take on. Thank you, Sean. I really appreciate our work with you, with MICCI. It's a valued partnership that our school has had for many years, and one that we will continue to nurture and grow. And Dr. Cheng, thank you for the work that you've been doing with our students, supporting our students, particularly our older students, as they prepare to head on to higher education. We really value that relationship. And we hope that will be a strong partnership that we can continue. So thank you all very much for your time this afternoon. I hope that if you've been joining us through Facebook, that there's been something of value for you. As I say, but there's always something we can take away from anything that we do. It's trying to find things that have meaning for us and have value for us. But I appreciate everyone's time this afternoon, and have a safe evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.